My last name?
Yes.
Spliet.
Spliet. Oh, yes.
Yeah,
hi, everyone. This is Bas Spliet. It's very good to be with you, Bas. You're a truther. I know that. You've gone over and above, and you're the honored guest on Truthseeker's Path. We were going to find out about your path and talk about that. How are you doing today? You're in Ghent right now, in Belgium.
Very nice to be here. Well, I'm not in Ghent right now, but I'm in Antwerp, where my parents live. But about 95% of the time I spend, I'm in Ghent. So true, and it's a beautiful city, and love to be here.
And you study there.
Yes, I in 2014 I started to study in Ghent, and that's when I moved to Ghent. Studied there for my bachelor degree in history, and I got that last year, and now I'm doing Arabic studies.
History last year, and now Arabic studies.
Indeed, yes.
And you're also a journalist already.
Well, I'll do my best. Yeah. Indeed, yeah.
Well, you're not only a journalist, you're an investigative journalist. And you've been to Syria, is that correct?
That's right. I was in Syria after a very long period of trying to apply for a visa. I finally got it. And I went there. I was there from Friday, 6th of April until Sunday, the 15th of April, and I went to Damascus, Homs, and Tartus. And as you might perhaps remember, there was a period that a lot of things were happening there, unfortunately.
Well, things have really gone crazy. I'd like to get your advice on that. Maybe we'll lead up to that, because the purpose of this is to get to know you, and there's many reasons for that. The truthers, I mean, when I first hear you, and when people listening hear you, they hear a very humble, honest guy. I mean, you're doing your journalism, you're doing your history. You didn't even mention journalism, but you're already doing much more than 99.9% of everyone we see on the mainstream TV. In your young career, did you ever expect you would be a better journalist before you finished university than all of the mainstream media?
Well, I'm honored to hear that. Thank you. But yeah, it's true, because, well, it's true that there are very few journalists in Belgium who go to Syria, to the government-held parts at least, as far as I know. And when they do, they tend to not deviate from the NATO line that they've been told to report on. But when you're there in Syria, it's true that you cannot see everything, and that you can go on all sides of the spectrum, that you can visit rebel-held areas, for example, but of course that's impossible. But it's impossible to go there as a journalist and have the, in my opinion, I cannot believe that you could go and visit and still believe what you've been told and what you've reported over the years, and still not start to think from, maybe there's some things that are like exaggerated or not been told quite properly in our media. Yeah, that's definitely true.
Well,
unfortunately.
Let's get into that, Bas. Since you're on the subject, we'll come around to how you woke up later. We can turn this around a little bit. Since you're on the subject, Bas, so what if I'm visiting there, which I haven't been. I've been to many foreign countries, but I've never been to Syria. What sort of things would I see? How would I understand that something is wrong? Let's say I go in and all I've read is mainstream news. What are the first things that tell me something's different?
There's so much things to say, but perhaps I'll start from an apolitical level. What is the first thing that you hear when you hear just about Syria? Is conflict, division, violence, and you expect that people are very afraid and are in conflict with each other, that Christians and Muslims and Sunni and Shia people don't really get involved. But, and I'm really not exaggerating here, you see more of this tension, in my opinion, here in Brussels or in Ghent. In Ghent, well, perhaps in Ghent a little bit less, but in Brussels, for example, or a lot of cities in the Western world, as opposed to Syria. Because like people are just so friendly and they all emphasize, even though, even if I'm not asking about it, they'll emphasize that they respect each other's faith and they come along just fine. And you see that confirmed in like many small businesses where Christians, Sunni, Shia, Ismailites, Druze, all these people just work together and are friends with each other. For example, I spoke to a handcraft shop or owner in one of the souks of Damascus, and he makes like these oud instruments. And he told an anecdote about French journalists who were visiting his souk. And it was like some sort of holiday, I don't remember what exactly. And all these shop owners who were also people of different faith, who were like both Christians, like the one who talked to, I talked to, and Muslims, come together and have breakfast on the street. And they invited these French journalists to come over and have breakfast with them. And one of these journalists was just so amazed, and like he couldn't believe like something like that could happen, not only in wartime but just in general, because he said like I would never see something like that in my home country in France. And that's when you see that, you really start to think, to what extent is this a civil war, and how this all happened, and how does this all happen? Because again, you only see, I only saw the government-held parts, but what you see there is people tend to be rather pro-government, as you probably noticed, but that's quite the opposite from what you've been told in the media. And there might be people who choose for the government for pragmatic reasons, because they don't want the other side, but you just see so many people like interacting with the soldiers on the street, just like if they're friends, they're like in public transport together, or somebody might just like go talk to a soldier and say something about the weather, how the weather is like that day. And they've become, unfortunately, of course, because nobody likes checkpoints at every point of the street, but you can see that mostly these soldiers are just part of the society at this moment. And you also see a lot of Syrian flags just everywhere, and also like photos of President Assad are like literally all around. And if you see that and you have just consumed mass media, you just might start to think, maybe something is wrong here indeed. True.
So this is an agenda item. How badly the mainstream media wants and is orchestrated to create this idea of tension as part of the policy to justify all of the wars and all of the actions of wars and all of the reasons for the actions of wars. It's a crime.
Yeah, that's what you see, just organized chaos. And that's, in my opinion, we could go into that as well. If you look at Iraq, for example, and when you heard the discourse of Western leaders before the Iraq invasion in 2003, they would say they wanted to bring democracy and all of these things, which of course we know they're lies. Even everybody now acknowledge that. And many people look back at this conflict and think, well, this was a disaster. We didn't intend it to end up this way. And the same in Syria. People think, oh, it's so bad what have happened there. And yeah, it's true that there are like a lot of conflicting parties, and we have made some mistakes, but it's really horrible that there's a lot of chaos here. But I actually, personally, I do think that this is the intention, to create this chaos, because this way there's no actual strong resistance that can rise up against Western and Zionist aggression in Israel and beyond. Yeah.
Okay, so how did you navigate the area? What sort of stories did you publish? What people did you meet? Did you come away with a new vision on life? Could you give us the general impression and what you've done about it?
Yeah. I talked to many different people. Mainly, no, not mainly, but from religious leaders to artists to just people on the streets, and even I also talked to civilians from Eastern Ghouta. So this was the area, Eastern Ghouta, which had been under control of the rebels, to call it with a neutral term. And just what they have told me about life under these rebels is just horrifying. But I'm sure your listeners already know that. But maybe more interesting is when I came back from Syria, I didn't really want to, but I felt it incumbent on myself to give some sort of presentation, a lecture about what I had seen in combination with my research I had done over the last few years. So it's now exactly a week ago that I did a presentation in Ghent, and was titled quite provocatively, and perhaps I regret the title in retrospect a little bit, but it's called "Everything You've Been Told About Syria is a Lie." It was especially meant to people who consume just mainstream news here, because they're told a lot of propaganda, a lot of lies, and these lies are used to justify this foreign aggression, which we have seen through the last couple of weeks, and throughout the whole war, by extension. And contrary to what I expected, there was actually there was a lot of tension between the nights. Let me put it this way, because people were interested to listen, but there were also some Syrian refugees there who didn't all agree with my views. So it was quite interesting. But it was a debateful night, and just what I didn't expect is that public opinion has become so polarized between most people who live in Syria and people that have fled Syria and are Syrian refugees. Because what they've told me is also true. They tell me about torture and repression that has happened on the side of the Syrian government, which is still true, but they were because this happens, a lot of people, Syrians in diaspora, tend to be more anti-Assad, but that's not the case in Syria itself. I think most people there are supporting the government in their fight against the terrorists. And it's just so what I've reflected so much upon these days. How do we build bridges, and how do we include everybody again into rebuilding Syria and kicking the foreign aggression out, and hopefully the political freedoms that people also desire, how can they gradually be reformed as well? And it's an open question. I think it's because it's so bad to see. It's so not nice to see that there's so much conflict between Syrians Syrians outside of Syria and inside of Syria, and I really want to find a solution for that, but unfortunately I don't have a glass ball. I can't predict it. So if you know, please help me. But
this is all this. No, I wish I had more solutions as well. Part of the solution, I think, is the dialogue, and part of it is what we're doing right now, just to open the debate up. And we're taking control of the debate back from those big structures that try to dominate the debate. And I think the grassroots movement.
What is interesting is, even though there was like a lot of discussion, and I think, and in the end it was like a pretty productive discussion, so that was good. It was like, maybe it had to do something with the title as well, but there was like a lot of interest for the event. Actually, it was I only had 100 seats, and it was like full. So if there would be more place, there would be like maybe 200 people. I don't know, without really promoting the event. So that does mean that that people who are not really involved in doing what we do are starting to see through the lies they've been told on the mass media, and are like, maybe we should go listen to this random 22-year-old student who went there on his own and is now coming back, and maybe we should listen to him, what he has to say. And that's something you just could not imagine maybe 10 years ago. I don't know, I was pretty young still, but maybe you can talk about that more, but I can imagine it was like just not possible that there's the same ways of communicating and the rise of the internet. And we're taking over. That's for sure.
Yeah, thanks for taking that debate from Syria to Belgium and to here, to the world, really, because that's what this is all about. You and I have met for the first time here. I've seen your writings. I saw that a young guy went to Syria and had some very good writing. So I decided to interview you. I'm trying to have a mix of people here on one channel, and I want to promote everyone who tries to get the truth out with an honest effort. That's all. That's it. That's all we need. Because this big money and this big agendas, you know that they want the war. You know what they're doing now. They're engineering the reasons to make war and justify it. It's all part of a multi-trillion-dollar campaign. Lots of money is here. The weapons deals, the resource thefts, and the global government doesn't have a chance until sovereignty is completely obliterated from the planet. That's what they're doing.
Yeah, on the national level as well as the individual level, they're trying to submit everybody under the control grids, unfortunately. Yeah. And as maybe we're attacked on our own ways, but the people in these more independent nations are the ones that suffer so hard. Look at Iran, look at Syria, look at Libya, and so and that's what I like ended with in the lecture is, how long are we gonna do this? Because like that was like the last sentence was just, the blood is on our hands, and we have to recognize this. If we don't do something about it, NATO and the governments, the Western governments, will keep going to nation after nation. And we all seen the news the last couple of days. It increasingly looks so that Iran is next. So it's just insane. Fortunately, there's a little bit more sanity, at least in Europe, about the redrawing of the US outside of the JCPOA, the nuclear deal. But I don't know. Maybe this is what they want, because you have seen. I just read that Israel yet again struck Syria, and there's not really. There might be condemnation of the US pulling out of the Iran deal, but these Israeli strikes on Syria have been like ongoing for the past few weeks, and there's not so much condemnation in Europe about that, unfortunately.
Yeah. So let's go back around to how you got started. What was your wake? Have you always been awake? I mean, almost everyone that I talked to seems like they were going along in life, and one or two or more many a period of time where they woke up. Could you describe that awakening process to what's that the world is not what we think it is?
I think it's such an amazing question. It's nice that you ask about that. I love to answer it. I know I don't know the specific date, but I know the day as if it was yesterday. It was actually the day of my last exam in my first year. In my first year of my bachelor studies history. So there was maybe I think summer, June 2016 or no 2015, something like that. And I was browsing through YouTube. And then I bumped into a video. It was called I don't know I don't remember the title, but it was by architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth, which you probably are aware of. And I clicked on that, and they showed me like it's like a very thorough interviews, well-documented interviews about how the WTC towers came down to the ground what they thought was like a controlled demolition way, and I was halfway in the video. I was like, wow, what is this all about? Is this true? Is this whoa? Of course I didn't believe it at first hand. So I stopped the video. I went to buy a pasta. I came back and I watched the rest of the video. And from there on, I was like, it was weird that I came on this video, but fortunately I did, because then I gradually moved away from what I've been told and from the mass media, and I started discovering several sites. I shifted through some segments of the alternative media, some dark segments as well, but then I finally ended up with the sites which really brought me much truth, and there was just so much that suddenly so much so-called truths that suddenly were not so true anymore, but somehow I really got really interested in the Syrian issue, the Syrian conflict. So I decided to focus. Well, it was a natural process, because you cannot investigate everything at the same time. So I ended up investigating the war in Syria. And after some months, I decided, I want to write this down, or I want to at least show this to my friends. So I wrote 5 articles. A series of 5 articles called "The Proxy War on Syria." That was my first article series in December of 2016, I think. I published that, and from there on, I progressed until today. Yeah, that's the story.
That is an amazing story. Thanks very much for sharing, Bas. I love to hear that. So if you woke up in 2015 and you started publishing by the next year, and you went the year after that, or so.
I think it was the summer of 2014. It was summer of 2015. But maybe a year after I started publishing about Syria and talking about it, I started to apply for the visa, the press visa, which I only got in December of 2017, so a couple of months back. And then when I finally got it, I immediately started to plan, and that's when I ended up in Syria about a month ago. Yeah.
That's amazing. One question I'd like to ask, you mentioned rebels, and I know that you said that's the word that is most often used. What is your belief in the rebels? Who are they, and what is their agenda? What is the rebels all about, as far as what you have learned from being on site in Syria?
Yeah, that's such a difficult question, because at least now. Oh, wait a second. At least now. Yeah.
Ja, ik dacht,
Sorry. Yeah.
weggaan.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'll just pause it here, and we'll have Baz back in a second.